From the Irish Times, he's the wine correspondent. He has been going around various regions telling us all about the various wines. This week he is in Spain with familiar name Rioja.
Good morning, Declan.
Good morning, John. So where is it in Spain?
In Spain, it's up near the northern part. In fact, it's just south of the Basque Country, and part of it is actually in the Basque Country.
So it's over that side.
It's over that side, sort of
the Atlantic
right
side,
going down, quite close to the northern coast. In fact, as I said, part of it is in the Basque Country, which shows you how far north it is. It's divided into three sections. There's Rioja Alava, which is the Basque part. There's Rioja Alta, which is high up in the Cantabrian Mountains, which is the key to Rioja. And then there's Rioja Baja, which is down lower and it's much hotter. So generally when you get a Rioja, it'll be from 2 or 3 of the regions. They have a history of blending them together.
Okay, and what's the predominant grape then?
There's 2 grapes. The classic Rioja will be made from about 70% from a grape called Tempranillo, which is one of Spain's greatest grape varieties. Makes very long-lived wines with good colour, a little bit, and good tannins, a little bit lacking in fatness and richness. So what they do is they have another one called Garnacha, which is Grenache over in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but it's a Spanish grape variety. And Garnacha gives lots of richness, lots of alcohol, and it sort of fills it out and gives it body. So Garnacha is typically grown down in the south, in the Baja region. Tempranillo's up in the Basque region and the Alta region. So you get a blend of the elegance of Tempranillo from the north with the richness and power of Grenache from the south. But most producers would blend the two together. So you would say it'd be about 70% Tempranillo, about 20-25% Garnacha, and then they have another couple of grape varieties called Mazuelo or Graciano, which they blend in.
And they put into oak then?
They do, and this is what Rioja is known for. It's Oak City. 2 reasons for that. One was about the 1850s, 1860s, 2 Marquéses went up to Bordeaux. One was the Marqués de Murrieta, the other Marqués de Riscal. They both studied winemaking there, came across barrels and said, these actually make wine taste better. So they brought them back. About 20 years later, in the 1880s, France was hit by a terrible disease called phylloxera, which was wiping out all vines around France. So they actually came down to Rioja, to produce wine, and they brought their barrels with them. And then Rioja went through a boom because it didn't get phylloxera for about another 10-15 years, so it exported all of its wine back up to France again. So they do have oak, and people get a little bit confused about it. They sort of have 4 divisions in Rioja. One is Joven, which means young, which means it's completely unoaked. Then you have Crianza, and if you look at the front or back label, it'll always have one of these things. Crianza means it has to be aged in oak for a minimum of 6 months, and it has to be aged for a year before you release it. Going up to Reserva then, that has to be aged for, just check my notes, get 3 years in total, 12 of those in oak barrels. And then Gran Reserva, which is not made every year but is the very, very top of Rioja winemaking, actually has to spend 5 years before you release it, and 3 of those must be in oak. And there's 2 things behind this. One is Rioja should always be ready to drink when you buy it. It's not like one of these great Bordeaux that you need to keep for 10, 20 years. This idea of aging it in bottle and in oak means that it's mature and ready to drink.
But I've seen white wine from Rioja.
Yes, yeah. Now, I'm not very fond of it. They do it. They're not very good at it. And in fact, one of the wines we're going to taste, Marqués de Riscal, back in the 70s, they went to a completely different region and make a fantastic white wine from a region called Rueda. But that is...
Oh, my favourite.
Yes.
Well, nice little Rueda in Tesco for a tenner at the moment.
Yeah, and it's a great wine, actually. Yeah. It's a great wine. It's lovely, crisp.
White,
and if you like Sauvignon Blanc, it's actually right along those lines.
But listen, we go to Ibiza mostly every year. So I mean, I've seen Marqués de Riscal. It's cheaper in Spain than it is here, but it's really expensive here.
It is. No, it's an expensive wine, but it's one of the most popular Riojas here. It's still a family-owned company. They've been going since the 1850s, and they're still one of the Marqueses in charge. He's actually, in the last couple of years, he's built this amazing new winery and Michelin star restaurant designed by Frank Gehry, who also designed the Guggenheim Museum. So they're obviously making plenty of money, but they have this wine, the Reserva.
Okay, we'll pour out a bit there.
Try this one.
What is that now?
Now this is the Marqués de Riscal.
Now, why do they have what looks like chicken wire or something on the bottles? And Faustino do it as well.
They do. Well, this was actually invented by the Marqués de Riscal, because back in the last century, well, century before that, the late 19th century, unscrupulous wine merchants were taking the wine out, drinking it, and putting inferior wine back and the cork back in and selling it off as Marqués de Riscal. So he invented this system that once you remove the top of the chicken wire, you cannot put it back on again. And the label was actually on top of the chicken wire, so that once you moved it, it came loose. So nowadays they don't need that. They've got all sorts of other ways of making sure that there's no fraud going on. But it looks nice.
Tradition.
Yeah, it's tradition. Now, have you tried this?
I tell you, that reminds me of my holidays. That's fantastic. That's sitting on the balcony late at night having the chats.
Yeah, that's lovely wine. It's light, because Rioja is generally a very elegant style of wine, so there's not too much alcohol. You get a bit of that vanilla oak, but you also get nice sort of dark cherry fruits. Now, unusual thing about this wine is it's almost all Tempranillo. There's very little or no Garnacha in it at all. But you like that?
Well,
that would cost you about €23. Very
really?
Widely available in all the supermarkets.
I'll have to have some rich friends.
You would, yes. Now, here's another one. Now, this is sort of from a young guy who came along and tried to change everything. It's actually made by a Frenchman, but 4 or 5 years ago, there was a group who got tired of all this oak wine and Reserva, Grand Reserva, and said that's not the way you make wine in a modern era. So they've done away with the lengthy oak aging. They've done away with the Reserva, Gran Reserva. If you look at the back of his label, it just says Coseca, which just means wine of a year. So this wine hasn't been aged in oak at all, but it is a very, very high quality wine.
That's different, all right. That's a different style. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So Rioja is not just homogenized as we all think. You just, Rioja, they all taste the same.
Yeah. Well, these are the Enfant Terrible. And some of them, I mean, you can pay €120 a bottle for some of their top wines. This one's not as expensive. This is about €18 a bottle. But this was in my wine book last year. I adore this wine because what he's got is that lovely, elegant fruit from the Tempranillo. He's got the richness from the Garnacha, but there's no oak getting in the way. This was a French guy who came over to Rioja, who worked in a couple of places in France, fell in love with it, saw it as a business opportunity. So he didn't have any vines. He had to buy in grapes for a couple of years. And I think he found life difficult, but now he's been hugely successful. And it's still a small producer, but he's bought a couple of vines. But there are other guys making wines in similar style like this, with doing away with all this oak, and particularly lengthy oak aging. Because the problem with oak, not with the Marqués de Riscal, but if you go into the supermarket, you'll find a Reserva at €10 a bottle. Now, the problem with aging inferior wine, because they're made from inferior wines in oak barrels, is it doesn't get any better. It just tastes weedy. The fruit drops out of it.
How do we know? Because you have to tell us how we know.
Well, I always say to people, if you find a Gran Reserva at €8 a bottle, why would anyone sell their very best wine at €8 when they can get it for more?
Right.
I mean, Crianza, you can expect to pay between €10 and €15 for a good Crianza. You can expect to pay 15 to 25 for a good Reserva, and Gran Reserva, you're talking 30 to 40 euros. Now, all of the companies would make them in that sort of price bracket. So if all of a sudden you come across a Reserva and it's $6.99, chances are it's not going to be a great wine.
All right. Thanks, John. So Marqués de Riscal, much?
€23 and widely available, including O'Brien's, Tesco's, occasionally promoted down to about 20. And then the other one is called Reyes Uva, from Rioja, and it's €18 a bottle. I got mine in Latouche, but it's also in 64 wine. And if you want to try a different kind of Rioja, the Reyes Uva, it's got this distinctive black label. I think it's one well worth looking out for.
John Wilson, the wine man in the Irish Times, and you have a book coming out of course, on the way.
Early October, where we reckon it'll be ready.
Lovely, okay. Lovely. And cheers. Thank you very much indeed.